Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about one of the most important economic stories of the year. President Donald Trump's decision to pick Kevin Warsh as the next chair of the Federal Reserve.
If you're wondering who Kevin Warsh is and why markets care, let's break it down. Warsh is a Fed veteran. He served on the Board of Governors from 2006 to 2011, right through the run-up to the global financial crisis and the chaotic years that followed. He was appointed by President George W. Bush and was one of the youngest governors ever to sit at that table. During that period, Warsh helped design emergency lending programs to stabilize frozen credit markets, and he was involved in the broader toolkit the Fed and Treasury used to keep the financial system from collapsing. One of the signature efforts of that era, TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, was crafted at Treasury, but Warsh was in the room for the broader rescue architecture. Here's what makes him different. He came out of that crisis era as a critic of how far the Fed ultimately went. Warsh warned that massive bond buying and near-zero interest rates could distort markets and threaten long-run price stability. He supported the initial emergency response, but he voted against the second round of quantitative easing. Since leaving the Fed, he's argued that post-crisis policy stayed too easy for too long and may have planted the seeds of future problems. Fast forward to today. Trump is calling Warsh central casting for the job, praising his background in a Truth Social post and highlighting his current role as a distinguished visiting fellow at Stanford. Warsh's resume also includes a law degree from Harvard, time in investment banking at Morgan Stanley, and a stint in the Bush White House as a special assistant on economic policy. Philosophically, Warsh has positioned himself as a defender of Fed independence, but also as a critic of what he calls mission creep. He said the central bank needs regime change and has talked about a credibility deficit among current Fed leaders. That sets up a sharp contrast with Jerome Powell's more pragmatic, consensus-driven style. So what changes if Warsh takes the chair? First, his appointment would signal a tougher line on inflation and on the size of the Fed's balance sheet. You should expect more skepticism toward open-ended stimulus and a greater emphasis on long-term credibility. Second, the big political question: can he deliver the aggressive rate cuts Trump clearly wants? The answer is not simple. Many voting members of the Fed's policy committee have already said they don't want to cut much more until inflation is clearly on track to 2%. Their own projections point to only a limited number of cuts over the next couple of years. The Fed chair is first among equals, not a dictator. Warsh will still have to build consensus. Some analysts think that because he has a reputation as an independent, hawkish voice, he might actually be better positioned than others to persuade the committee to support 2 or even 3 cuts if the data allow. His credibility on the right could give him room to be pragmatic. Third, remember the politics. Before any of this happens, Warsh needs to be confirmed by the Senate. There's an ongoing controversy over an expensive renovation of the Fed's Washington headquarters, and at least one Republican senator has threatened to block Trump's Fed nominees until that's resolved. Once that hurdle is cleared, though, many observers expect Warsh to have relatively broad support and a solid path to confirmation. For investors, businesses, and households, the bottom line is this: Trump has chosen a Fed chair with deep crisis experience, a history of skepticism about ultra-easy money, and a stated commitment to independence, even as the White House clearly wants lower rates to help housing and to ease the burden of a massive national debt. How Kevin Warsh balances those pressures, data versus politics, long-term credibility versus short-term stimulus, will shape interest rates, asset prices, and the broader economy in the years ahead.
Stay tuned. We'll keep following this story as his confirmation moves forward and as we see how his views start to show up in actual Fed decisions.